Jen Hutchins here with the Men's School coaches. We're going to talk about mentoring today. Dene and Snake and Dave are here, and we're going to talk about the ways in which this mentoring, coaching sort of relationship works in our lives, since we're all coaches, and how it might serve you. So, Snake, this was sort of your topic. Do you want to start off? You wanted to talk about how each of us was mentored. Say more about what you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I've long struggled making a differentiation between coaching and mentoring, and I think we could talk volumes about that, but I offer up my definition is that coaching oftentimes is an immediate need, something that's on fire in a man's life or something that he's going through that he needs some advice or some counsel or just a place to run it by. Mentoring for me is a much more lengthy relationship. It borders on a friendship and it carries many of the same qualities as coaching, but it tends to offer up 2 years, 3 years. And some of the mentees that I've worked with have been with me at least that long, some longer. I spoke with one this morning anticipating this conversation, and I've been mentoring him for about 4 years now. And one of the comments that he made was that when he first asked me to mentor him, I said, I'm not real comfortable with the word mentoring, but if it means that we get to be better friends, more intimate, and make a contribution to one another's lives, I'm in. Mm-hmm. He said that meant an awful lot to him at that point. He had put me somewhat on a pedestal, and the fact that I was willing to come in and ask for something from him by way of a reciprocal relationship meant a lot. And that launched the mentoring relationship. At this point, after 3-4 years, there isn't a hierarchy. I'm not the teacher. He's not the student. We're men walking through life together with somewhat of a history and a relationship. And I haven't that with as many coaching clients as I do mentoring clients. And I think mentoring is somewhat of a lost art. And I'd love to see it utilized more in the world. It certainly is fundamental to men's work.
You've spoken so clearly and deeply, it's hard to say anything except a personal nuance, and that is the term mentoring and the way I understand it also feels to me that it's about a richer, deeper relationship. And I'd like to myself do almost all mentoring and very little coaching. And it fits your description, Snake, because coaching is, you got a little problem, something's going on, sure. Let's have 1, 2, 3 conversations about that. Mm-hmm. The ongoing process of, as you say, I love it, walking the path with other men. Now that's a rich thing that I'm just adding to my life. That's the way I want my life to evolve. And it also just so happens, having now almost 70 years on the planet, it's about time I take on that role, the sannyasin role, where I am in some ways sort of wandering the streets, begging for food and for the opportunity to help someone with what I've amassed over my lifetime.
I've been very blessed to have some really brilliant mentors in my early days in men's work. Most of the men who started this work, because I came in fairly early, I benefited from them. We were all on fire with this new men's movement, this new consciousness raising, this new opportunity to speak truths and to be able to be in a room with a group of powerful men and have differences and conflicts and work it out. There was something rich and delicious and juicy about it. But I never for one moment forgot that these men had something that I believed at the time that I lacked. And there was what the exchange was, what they were giving, what I was receiving, because I've always looked at relationships as needing to maintain a certain balance. If there's an exchange of information back and forth that's reciprocal, that's one type of relationship. If there is a verticality in it, I think the verticality in the relationship needs to be acknowledged as well. What the exchange is from the mentee to the mentor, or from the coachee to the coach, I'm not sure qualitatively that there's a differential. But when I'm in a relationship with someone as a coach, I bring a certain wisdom and a certain skill set that they pay for. And if that relationship retains itself over time, we begin to develop a multidimensional relationship. I get to consult to his business. I get to talk to him because the time that we meet is all about him. There is a financial exchange in it. I've been reluctant to say yes to requests to be mentored because I don't know that I have the room in my life to give that kind of energy, to take the time for someone else's development if I'm not getting something in the exchange. So I admit to being a little bit selfish and kind of quizzical about the differential between those two.
The original mentor was from the Odyssey, right? It was mentor was the guy who Odysseus asked to teach his son while he was going to be gone for, forever, potentially, but certainly for many decades. And, in that mentoring relationship, it was, I'd say, very much that sort of classical verticality aspect that you speak of, Denny, of, the teacher and the student, and the dispenser and the receiver and the teller and the listener, that kind of a thing. And what I see in the modern age is so much more of this kind of horizontal relationship aspect that Snake and you were speaking of, where the mentor is really seeing this arc of a life, the sort of longer view, whereas a coach might be, hey, the next 90 days, these are the things you want to work on. I'm going to help you get those. So I can see how there'd be mentors who coach at times more likely than there are coaches who mentor at times, right? It's more inclusive in that way. And I love another word, the sensei is the Japanese word for teacher, and the pictogram, the kanji that shows the tip of the ox's horn. And the idea is that wherever you are with the ox, the tip of the horn is always a little bit ahead. And that's the sensei, the one who's just a little bit further down the road. Not all the way at the end of the road, but just a little further along to be able to give that perspective and sense. And I agree, Snake, that's, I think, where some of this lost art of mentoring is the ones who are really willing to say, hey, I've got a little bit more perspective. How can I be of service to you? And seeing this path, seeing the arc that you're on.
A good way to broaden it a bit, too, is I looked into the word stewardship, and I was discussing it with my son. And stewardship, by the dictionary, is to care for or nurture something that rightfully belongs to another. My son stopped me and he said, well, that's not quite right. What it actually should be is stewardship is the act of caring for or nurturing something that belongs to us all. Now that broadens both stewardship and mentoring in a big way, because oftentimes by my coaching or mentoring, however I differentiate it, it makes my life better to have more grown-up men integrated and active and out there in the world. So I like how stewardship holds hands with mentoring as well, in the broadest sense of making our world a much more inhabitable place.
Delicious, and it seems to speak to the emotion that seems to be prevalent in the world I'm experiencing, of so many people feeling as though things are going wrong and feeling helpless about it. When, as you describe, I spent most of my life in that state, kind of unconsciously, as the lone wolf, I'm by myself in everything I do. I don't need anybody else. And it was a very comfortable way to be for a long period of time. But one thing about starting to do the work is I came to realize, and I liked the sweetness of the way you put it, Snake. Suddenly I find myself on a call like this with men like you who are deep and valuable parts of my life. And it's only because I chose to be willing to tell my truth and hold space for other men to tell their truth. And this makes my life that much richer. And it does speak to how the ultimate questions that we're all concerned about right now might be solved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, beautiful. And so much part of stewardship, exactly as you describe it, Snake, is saying, I'm doing this act of stewardship because you are so worthwhile, right? Because it's so important, right. Because you have value, and there's this power and beauty in being a mentor, which is also part of being a coach, but I really associate it more with mentoring, which is saying, I really see you, I see your gifts, I see that you are the gift, and it's time for you to step up into that potential. And how can I support that? How can I support that arc? How can I let you see yourself in the way that I see you?
Mm. And so many different things connect in there too. Our willingness to project on another man, our own gifts. And it's one of the games I used to play when I was leading a lot of NWTAs, is a guy would project wonderful things on me, and I'd remember it. And a year or two later, staff with him and turn it right back at him. And just the look in his face delighted me. But there's a validation in that. In what you once projected on me, now you inhabit. And that is a big piece of the work, I think.
I think it's a very big piece of the work. In fact, I remember having a conversation with Robert Moore and hearing him say into our circles, he said, you know, the job of an older man is to admire a younger man.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that makes sense because, you know, you and I, we've been in this work a long time, and I'm always looking, when I do an NWT, I'm always looking for those young, sharp guys that are hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And invariably, they'll project some of their gold onto men like you and me. And I think our job is to hold that for them until they're ready to reclaim that as their own gold. But I think our job as older men is to find young men that radiate with that gold, that have that potential. They're the pearl that needs to be polished. They're the coal that needs a little bit more pressure. And I try to find them and reflect back to them whatever goal they can hear about themselves, and really encourage them to stay in the work. And invariably, it does come back a year or two later, and you see them, you know, they've taken the next level. They've staffed half a dozen times, and they're shining in their beauty already. It's beautiful to witness that.
And I think part of where the wisdom comes from is I've been there. I came into the work convinced that I was a fraud, but I look good.
Mm-hmm.
And older men took me aside and convinced me that, you know, yeah, I was a fraud, but only because I hadn't stepped into my authenticity.
That's right.
And who I had to be was right there for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I know the process because I subjected myself to it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is the example of the way this group of men talks and coaches and lives. And it's sweet for me to sit with you and have this conversation. I hope folks take advantage of all the wisdom in this circle. Bless you, men. Thank you very much. And we'll do more of this.
The Men's School.